Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Before we get started, I want to thank a friend of mine. He just recently became a member of the squad as a senior officer, so I appreciate that. I've known you for a long time, prideful one, so I want to give a shout out to you, and I hope in the near future we have to play some more games together like we did in the past. To start off the night, we're going to talk about Bad Touch, which is the last of the commanders from Assassin's Creed that I wanted to play in builds. Aveline de Grandpre. The significance about her is she kind of plays very similar to Finn, the Fangbearer, where Finn was whenever a creature with Death Touch dealt damage to a person, you applied 2 poison counters. She also does this kind of weird effect where when you go to combat with your death touching creatures, you force your opponents into this tough decision. Either A, they trade off a creature and they trade down with something of cheaper cost, because I'm running a lot of low to the ground death touchers in this deck, or they let it hit them and they get
really big.
For every time a creature with Death Touch deals damage to a player, they put that many counters on themselves. The disguise ability doesn't really matter on her because she's from the command zone. There's not really any secrets she can be hiding from anybody. In case you weren't aware, this deck is $92. I kept it well below the $100 threshold, so it should maintain within that budget for a decent amount of time. We'll go over the 1-drops. I have 21 in total in this deck, so the curve is quite impressive. Look at that bar graph. Love to see it. But the average is 1.52. It's not one of my cheapest, but it's still pretty darn cheap. First creature, we have Fang of Shigeki. If you like white weenies, this might be a deck for you. If you ever played white weenies in like a 60 card format, this deck kind of plays very similarly in terms of aggro. You'll go turn 1 drop, turn 2 more 1-drops, and then hopefully you drop Aveline in the following turn. I do have a package outside of just Death Touchers that are 1-drops, but my ramp package is also pretty darn good. That's one of the best parts about green, and it's a creature heavy deck. It's 37 creatures. Actually, all 3 of the decks I built for this week are all very creature heavy in general. Freak is Chosen, another 1-drop with Death Touch. Ankle Biter, Parkwood Spider. In terms of also what it feels like when I was playing this, is it feels like Sovereign Akanau. If you ever played that, it's the Selesnya cat from Caverns of Ixalan. The difference in between the style is significant. When in the Aveline deck, you have to make a connection to the player. With the Sovereign Akanau deck, you don't. You just have to declare Sovereign as an attacker, but that's the trade-off. In Aveline doesn't have to attack to get the trigger. So it's like a give and take kind of a relationship. Whatever you'd prefer. Sajaru Blightblade, Fallmire Knight. This has the added benefit of having an adventure to draw a card and lose a life. Sedge Scorpion, Ashnod Flesh Machinist. This has a little extra value. Whenever it attacks, you get to sack another creature. If you create a tap Power Stone, you probably never would be doing that personally. This is not an artifact deck. You're not going to be taking a whole lot of advantage of the Power Stone. Moss Viper, Typhoid Rats, Bilious Skull Dweller. This one has Toxic. Not that it really matters. The only time it matters is if I have Finn in play, then I can consistently put the poison counters on people, but I honestly don't care. The best part of this deck is the 1-drop package because it's very redundant, maxed out. Ruthless Ripper has the benefit you can play it face down by morphing it, but I feel like when people see this in your command zone, they can put 2 together that the thing you're putting face down is a Death Touchers.
And then it's not a secret anymore.
So you might as well just play it face up. Hired Poisoner, Wasteland Viper. This one has Blood Rush, so you can give an attacking creature +1/+2. Do some kind of combat trick if you wanted to. Narnum Renegade, this one has Revolt. It could come in with an additional counter on it should something leave the battlefield that turn. Typically, you want to play around the Revolt mechanic is you play things main phase 2 post-combat because things could be traded off and you get the counter. Now this is the 1-drop ramp package. We got Wild Growth, we got Utopia Sprawl, we got all the elves like Land of War Elves, Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves. You have a 4-drop commander. And it's important that you get it down as fast as you can. Narwood Dryad, Death Toucher with Delirium. I like Delirium, or I like these creatures' design in general. Things that scale up into mid to late game are super fun. Customization Repass. This is one of the new MDFC cards that came out in MH3. I like the dual colored ones a lot, even though they don't come in untapped like the monocolored one. The abilities are quite significant, like an instant speed gives something protection and puts a counter on it. Pretty ideal. And then the trade-off is if you're going to have access to 2 colors on the backside, it should come in tapped. I think if it didn't, this would probably be like a $10 uncommon. They just claim to deal with pesky artifacts and enchantments. I like my removal packages to be 2 mana or less and at instant speed, because you never know what you can be dealing with if it's a combo list. Having things being done at sorcery speed is never good enough, so if you can, always pick the instant. And Vampire of the Dire Moon, Death Touch and Lifelink. Oddly enough, the most expensive one drop. At $1.84. Finn the Fangbearer, I already talked a little bit about this one. Death touching creatures when they connect throw poison on people. Guildsworn Prowler, I like this one for the card advantage package, or has a card advantage piece stapled onto it. On death, as long as it wasn't blocking, you get to draw. Master's Rebuke. Now, I normally really loathe conditional removal, but since all my creatures have Death Touch, these conditional removal pieces become unconditional. You just deal damage from a Death Touching source and things die. Same with Bite Down. Dusk Shell Crawler, this is a fun use of the mechanic of Trample. If you don't know how the keywords of Trample and Death Touch work, is Trample specifically says you will only have to assign the minimum of lethal damage to kill a creature and the rest goes over. In the form of Death Touch, say I attack with a 3/3 and someone blocks with their 4/4, I will only have to assign 1 damage to that 4/4 and the other 2 will spill over and hit the opponent. It's pretty awesome. Ram Through, this lets you deal excess damage if the creature would trample. Pretty fun. Probably in the late game, this will come up. I don't have a lot of things that give trample. I'm running this when I have a hard time getting in. I feel like people will let you hit them up to a certain point, and then when your stuff becomes so big that it becomes a lethal attacker, then they'll start chump blocking you, and that at that point they're just buying you time, and hopefully you're so low to the ground and have gotten so wide that throwing chump blockers in front of your stuff won't buy them enough time. That's what I'm hoping, but the Trample is a nice clause. There's a couple of other ones you could run. You could run the Gnarlid that does the same thing. You could also run the Elf Warrior. That one's a little more expensive. It's like $10. Both of the other ones I'm talking about have the clause of if it has a counter on it, it gains Trample. Or you could play the 2-drop enchantment that gives all your stuff Trample and just skip the +1/+1 counter thing altogether. But at 14 cents, it's a pretty good deal. Cheville Bane of Monsters. This is kind of fun. At the beginning of your upkeep, if no opponent has a bounty counter on something, you get to put one on a creature. And then whenever that permanent should die, you get to gain 3 life and draw a card. The way you play with this guy is you just pick the permanent that you think is going to most likely die in the very near future.
We are going to die!
Golgari Charm. This is purely in here for saving your board. It gives all your creatures regenerate till end of turn. Respond to board wipes with this. That's what I would save this for. And then if you absolutely have to, destroy an enchantment, or you could give all creatures -1/-1, which could be relevant if you're playing against token deck and you might have scaled up by then where that doesn't affect you, despite you running a bunch of 1-drops with 1 toughness. Rapid Vigor. This also regenerates all the creatures on your board. Really good for 90 cents. Dolmen Gate. I had a lot of spare room when I was putting this deck together. At original design, I had like $40 and change left to play with. And I was like, hey, you know what? Let's use it and let's splurge on things that would make this deck a lot better. And Dolmen Gate is one of them. It makes it so your attacking creatures don't take damage. So your opponents really have a really lousy decision at that point. They lose a creature or they take damage and your stuff gets bigger, and it's a lose-lose no matter what. Nighthawk Scavenger, this thing hits like a truck. Most of your Death Touchers don't have a lot of power on the front end. This is one of your few exceptions where it's evasive and has power on the front end. It also has lifelink, which could be useful for when you're going balls to the wall, attacking with everything all the time. You should probably never be defensive unless everyone can effectively stuff your board out. Blight Fang. This allows it so when a Death Toucher connects with the Planeswalker, you Death Touch the Planeswalker. It also drains your opponents for 1 life and you gain a life for each attacking Death Toucher. Honest Rothstein, I've always wanted to try this guy out. He's a really sweet uncommon where you get to return a creature from your graveyard back to your hand, and then he's a coupon for creatures. For a deck that has 37 creatures, that should be pretty useful. Branching Evolution. Now, I had a choice. I could include the things that double your counters and include the things that only add an additional. I decided to cut out the additional ones because it wasn't accelerating my game as fast as I would have liked. Doubling counters is a different story. The ceiling is much higher than just adding an additional one. So I eventually just cut things like Hardened Scales, just because I had like 6+ cards left over on the back end that needed to go and had to make a hard decision. If you wanted to add things like Hardened Scales to your decks, I won't judge you for it. It makes perfect sense why it would be in here.
Do what you want.
Glissa the Sunslayer, she's really nice, gives you card advantage, lets you destroy an enchantment or remove 3 counters from a target permanent. This could mess up a lot of planeswalkers. I like Glissa a lot in that you don't have to sacrifice damage to mess with planeswalkers as well. You also don't have to remove counters from the planeswalker of the player you hit. You could hit a different player who's more vulnerable and potentially kill a planeswalker on someone else's board. Quite nice. Vargoth Blood Sky Sire. This lets you tutor stuff and put it on top of your library. Normally I don't like tutors to put things on top of your library, but since it's recurable, it's like, why not give it a shot? Toxic Deluge. This is now budget friendly at $4. I've been waiting a long time to play Toxic on the channel. It's finally here. This is one of the best board wipes ever made, and it's because it costs 3 mana and you get to manipulate how much this Toxic Deluge hits the board for. So you could salvage parts of yours and still eliminate everyone else's. And since we're gonna be scaling our stuff up, it's very possible that you could sweep up everything else and not your own board with it.
Live in a world where you have everything and I have nothing.
Corpse Jack Menace, this is one of the other +1/+1 counter doublers. It's great in here. Occam Adversary, this is a card advantage piece and has cost reduction. Because green is such a popular color, most of the time I imagine you'll be paying 2 for this pretty consistently. Beast Whisperer for card draw. It's a creature heavy deck. Toski, whenever a creature deals damage to an opponent, draw. So it's just adding more difficult decisions for your opponents. It might make it more obvious, you know what I mean? Because not only are you making your stuff bigger, but you're drawing cards too. That might be too much and people might start chump blocking then. Viewpoint Synchronization. This is one of the new free running cards in green. This is an assassin commander, so you'll effectively be casting this for 3, I imagine, pretty consistently. But it's like a cracked out version of Cultivate. You search for 3 basics, put 2 into play, put 1 in hand. Boulder Vine Reclamation, whenever creature you control dies, draw a card, gain a life. Creeping Renaissance. Your crux of your deck is going to be board wipes. That's why the Vigor is in here. That's why the Golgari Charm is in here. This is for, you know, the non-preemptive recovery. This is the post-recovery. I'm not the biggest fan of it because it costs 5 mana. But it's better than nothing, and it picks up a big swath of your board. Ornn Frostfang, another Toski, but this gives all your target creatures Death Touch, so it gives your non-Death Touchers Death Touch, like your Mana Dorks, your Toski, what have you. Put Vigor in this. This is basically more expensive Dolmen Gate. Creatures that are dealt damage are prevented, and you put more +1/+1 counters on your stuff, so it makes your stuff incredibly scary. And then I threw Rise of the Dark Realms. This should hit a lot of stuff. Your opponents will be forced to trade off with you, so their graveyards are going to be full. By the time you get to 9 mana, your graveyard's probably going to be full. It's a great spell. Oddly enough, I would play the double-sided Shouldered that has the Saga that does the same thing, but it's like $15 and I couldn't condone putting it in here for that price tag, so I left it out. But if you want to upgrade, including the Shouldered that does effectively the same thing as Rise, I would throw it in here. And that's the tech. Now that we talked about it, let's play the game.